There's a specific kind of silence that settles over a live service game once the launch hype fades. It isn't the silence of death, though that often follows, but something more ambiguous. It's like a party after the music stops. You're left wondering if the people staying represent a dedicated core, or just the awkward remnants of an event that didn't quite land. Where Winds Meet is in that silence right now. Steam charts show the usual downward slide. Content creators have moved on to shinier prospects. The subreddit oscillates between defensive optimism and dead game doom posting, with the predictable rhythm of a community watching its world grow quiet. If you read player metrics as destiny, and the industry has trained us all to do that, the numbers look grim. But this is where the conventional narrative hits a structural problem. Everyone is jumping to the same diagnosis. The game launched, players burned through the content, and now the well is dry. We've seen this horror film enough times to know every beat. Except there's something fundamentally wrong with that diagnosis. A detail that, once you notice it, forces you to reconsider the whole situation. Where Winds Meet's content well isn't empty. It's being deliberately capped. In a typical live service, content production is the existential threat. You never know if a studio can actually deliver until they either do or their pipelines implode under the pressure. But Where Winds Meet operates under different constraints. There's a Chinese version of this game, running a full year ahead of the global release. While the global version launched at 1.1 last November, the Chinese servers are already at 2.3. That's a 12-patch gap that includes entire desert regions, snow biomes, new mechanics, and narrative expansions. It's all finished. It's all been tested at scale. It's already live. A full year of completed content is sitting on a shelf while the global community complains about a content drought. The contradiction is almost absurd. Which leads to the real question. Why would NetEase deliberately hold back a year of content while their player base is clearly worried? That's what forced me to look closer at what's actually happening here. Before we continue, quick word about today's sponsor, Exit Lag. If you've been dealing with lag while playing Where Winds Meet or any online game, Exit Lag is built to solve that at the technical level. It uses AI route optimization to find the fastest path between your connection and the server, basically GPS for your game data that automatically routes around congestion. Setting it up takes no time at all. Click the link in my description, sign up for their free 3-day trial, then download the software. Once you open it, you'll see a library with over 2,000 supported games. Type in Where Winds Meet, select the server region you're playing on, hit Apply Routes, and you're done. Also, they're currently running their Lunar New Year Festival promotion. 50% off annual plans, essentially 6 months free. Link and QR code on screen, also in the description. All right, back to the question at hand. Why would NetEase deliberately hold back a year's worth of finished content? I won't pretend to have a seat at their board meetings. The reason could be anything from localization bottlenecks and certification red tape to a calculated marketing strategy. But what's more interesting is what this structure actually creates, regardless of the motive. Most live service games are built on the engagement treadmill. Where Winds Meet seems to be attempting something structurally different. Here's the catch. The content cadence isn't actually that different from the industry standard. World of Warcraft drops major patches every few months, new raids, new systems. Where Winds Meet follows a similar timeline. The real difference isn't how fast the content arrives, it's what fills the silence between those drops. The traditional MMO model fills that gap with retention mechanics, designed with neurochemical precision. Daily login chores, weekly resets that turn the calendar into a source of anxiety, and FOMO architectures that make you feel like you're falling behind if you aren't constantly present. You run the same dungeons and raids not because you want to, but because the game punishes your absence. Miss a week and the gap widens. Miss a month and catching up feels like a second job. This is the implicit contract of the modern MMO. Surrender your life between updates, and in exchange, you get a sense of structure and social identity. It works for the developers because it keeps the concurrent player numbers high even when the well is dry. But you aren't playing those games casually. You're in a committed relationship with them. And leaving, even for a break, feels like a betrayal of the time you've already invested. What Where Winds Meet is doing feels like a fundamental departure from that contract. It has the live service cadence, but it behaves like a single-player game. Content arrives in seasonal waves, and between those waves, the game gives you permission to disengage. No progression penalties, no artificial daily obligations. When a patch drops, the population surges. When it's finished, the population declines, and the game treats that as intended behavior rather than a failure. It's an entirely different relationship architecture, one that doesn't demand a monopoly over your entire gaming existence. But that freedom carries a massive risk. Because from an economic standpoint, NetEase is executing a massive gamble with social proof. In the live service era, a game isn't just a product, it's a two-sided market. You have the developers providing content on one side, and the players providing vitality on the other. This creates a network effect. The more people play, the more valuable the game becomes. More players mean faster matchmaking, more active guilds, a thriving economy, and, critically, more content creators making guides that keep the game in the public eye. Steam chart supremacy and Twitch dominance aren't just vanity stats for the devs to brag about. They are the vitality metrics that attract new players. In this industry, we suffer from a perceived vitality bias. If a game looks dead on paper, it often triggers a self-fulfilling prophecy. Potential new players see a downward-sloping graph and think, why should I invest 100 hours into a world that might not exist in 6 months? Player acquisition collapses, the creators move on, and the death spiral begins. So, what's the exchange NetEase is making? They are trading short-term engagement maximization for long-term player health. They are swapping algorithmic velocity, the need to stay at the top of the charts at all costs, for content sustainability. Instead of weaponizing FOMO to keep you trapped in a loop, they're betting on a breathing player base, one that is allowed to leave and come back. It's a move that prioritizes the lifetime value of a player over the quarterly active user (MAU) count. And here is why this might actually work where games like New World or Anthem failed. Institutional patience. Amazon approached New World as a venture capitalist would. It was an investment vehicle. When the ROI didn't hit the projected targets, the rational move was capital reallocation. They moved on because they didn't have a 20-year stake in the genre. NetEase is the exact opposite. They are a $100 billion empire built entirely on long-horizon live service operations. Their flagship, Fantasy Westward Journey, has been profitable and record-breaking for over 2 decades. They don't panic when a chart dips for 3 months because they aren't planning for the next fiscal quarter. They're planning for the next decade. They have the expertise, the cash reserves, and, most importantly, a 13-month content lead already running in China. This isn't building a plane while it's in the air. It's a veteran pilot waiting for the right weather to land. But a strategy is only as good as the life it allows its players to lead. And that's where the structural case for Where Winds Meet starts to feel like a personal necessity. Because, like many of you, I've spent the last decade inhabited by the treadmill. I've done the years of mythic keystones and the Tuesday resets that felt less like a hobby and more like a second job. A career that only paid out in dopamine and digital chores. Now that I'm in my 30s with a professional career, I've realized the worst part of those games wasn't the time investment. it was the monopolistic claim they made on my existence. You couldn't explore a new title without a progression penalty. You couldn't take a sabbatical without falling irrecoverably behind. Where Winds Meet represents a fundamental shift in that power dynamic. Currently, my gaming life looks like a portfolio rather than a digital prison. I rotate between Where Winds Meet, Wuthering Waves, and Enfield. It's a Jianghu lifestyle that respects my time. If I represent the target demographic, busy, professional, but still craving depth, I suspect a lot of you are also reaching a breaking point with obligation theatre. That said, is the current implementation of this single-player live service perfect? Probably not. The energy mechanics can still feel like a clumsy anchor on theory crafting, and there is a real cultural friction between Eastern design and Western expectations. But look at the recent updates. The multi-character management system and the version 1.2 Arsenal optimizations that just dropped. These aren't explosive, clickbaity changes. They are focus points on foundational quality. They're listening to the friction points instead of just adding more chores. This is a fascinating experiment in breathing. When that massive Chinese content pipeline finally opens up, and we know it's there, we'll see if the player base surges back. If it does, NetEase will have proved that you can sustain a massive world without holding its inhabitants hostage. It's a future where games respect us as humans with lives outside the screen. And for me, that's a future worth watching.